We're with Kimberly Hull, and she is the founder of Achieve Ability Therapy Services in Florida. And I wanted to interview her today for Speech Therapist Day, National Speech Therapist Day. And one of the questions I have for you, Kimberly, is you are duly certified in ABA and also in speech language pathology. Can you tell me how did you end up there?
Well, I started out as a speech pathologist, and after I graduated, I worked in Western New York in a very rural area. I did early intervention, which at that time in New York State was birth to 5. And this was in the late 90s. So this was before there was a BACB. This was before there was national certification. And in that part of the country at the time, there was what we used to call clusters of kids diagnosed with autism. And a lot of these children ended up on my caseload. Unfortunately, I really felt as though I wasn't making a difference. I wasn't really able to help them. I couldn't even get them to sit and attend to anything I was trying to teach them or help them with. So back at that time, New York State was really, I think, progressive in how they just did early intervention in general, but also how they intervened in children diagnosed with autism. So at that time, it was very much a multidisciplinary program. So I would come in as a speech therapist. They were also getting daily special education services from a teacher. They were getting daily occupational therapy services if needed, as well as physical therapy services if needed. So it was a very comprehensive program. I happened to catch the tail end of a session done by a special education teacher that was also working early intervention in that part of the state. And she had the same child that I had been working with for weeks, not being able to get to sit in a chair or look at me or do anything. She had him sitting in a chair, giving her eye contact, imitating her gross motor wise, doing all sorts of following simple directions, doing all of these things that I had tried for weeks to get him to do. And I thought she was magical. And I'm like, what are you doing? Teach me to do it. And I just sort of grabbed onto her in that moment. She ended up being my mentor. Her name is Lisa Macaluso. She was trained at Columbia University Teachers College in New York City under Dr. Douglas Greer. And so she had a master's in special education with a minor in applied behavior analysis. And so at that time, there was no certification, but she had knowledge of the science. And so she took me under her wing and really taught me the science of ABA. And so from that moment, I just gravitated to the science. I love the accountability part of it. I love the data. I love being able to manipulate variables in the environment to get the results that I needed. And it made me a much better therapist, not just with early intervention, but across the age continuum. So I've worked with, birth to death, I call it. And so I have used the science across the entire age range and across various populations over the course of my almost 30-year career. So it was a game changer for me, complete game changer.
Wow, what a great experience. What does speech language pathology bring to your, I guess, toolbox when you created an autism center?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think that having both of those skills has brought to the table in terms of making your center the way it is today?
I think what it's brought is this unique perspective of really doing multidisciplinary services the way it should be done, really more of an integrative transdisciplinary approach. We were doing it years ago back in New York State. Like I said, we were getting amazing results, and then just bringing that into the clinic has allowed us, I think, to get results that maybe we wouldn't have gotten without the input of all of the different disciplines. I think speech pathology brings something unique to the table in that we're experts in the development of speech and language, and that combined with the science of ABA on how to teach it or how to execute, I think that partnership is a really powerful partnership.
Yeah, I've witnessed it when I collaborate with your team, when we see one of your speech therapists there in the meeting with your BCBA. But can you explain what it looks like? What does that good collaboration look like?
Well, first of all, in our clinic, all of our staff, at the very minimum, if they're not an analyst or an RBT, they have to be an RBT. So my speech staff, they have to go through the RBT training. So they do have that good foundation of ABA principles, right? How that looks in our clinic is that we're always talking to each other. We're always working within sessions together, giving each other feedback. We have team meetings on clients. And so we're all very familiar with what the other discipline is working on and what their goals are and what their plan of care says. So it's a very integrated, I think, model. It's not where one discipline's handing the file to the next discipline and the next and the next. It's truly integrative. And I think that's one of the unique things about achievability and what we're doing there.
And if you were talking to behavior analysts, what could we do as a field to honor speech language pathologists on International or National Speech Therapist Day?
I think just seeking out those relationships. I think there's been a lot of friction sometimes between the field of ABA and the field of speech language pathology. We're here to help. We're here to support what you're doing. We're not here to take over. We're here to support and help make you better not make you better. That's a bad way to put it. We're here to help you facilitate your goals. And we have some really unique ways to do that. I think as a speech pathologist, you're going to get buy-in, just like I had buy-in the minute I saw them be able to do things I couldn't do. Behavior is always a barrier as a speech language pathologist when you're working with kids on the spectrum. And so for me, if I have somebody in that session who can show me how to reduce that barrier or get over that barrier and allow me to teach what I know, which is speech and language development, and get the results that I need, I'm going to have instant buy-in. And I think just facilitating and collaborating and educating, I think those are the best things that we can do.
Yeah. And I think we can kind of turn that around too. Like, what are some things that BCBAs can do to be open? Like, what are some things we can learn from speech therapists?
I think maybe just understanding where our expertise really comes from. We don't, at least back in the day when I went through school, we didn't have we were told, hey, work on gross motor imitation. It will help verbal imitation later on, but we were never really taught the why of that. And so I think the unique thing that ABA brings to the table is, why does that work, right? But one thing we are trained in is we're experts in speech and language development and how it develops. We're experts in how all of these structures move and work to create the sounds that they create. So I think just respecting that fact and knowing that together we're stronger than we are individually, I think that's super important to keep in mind. Just in general, I think the more that we collaborate across disciplines, whether it's speech pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, or any of the other disciplines out there, along with applied behavior analysis, I think it's going to always benefit the client. And I think it's always best practice.
Yeah, it's just going to make our treatment stronger.
Agree. 100% agree. Yes.